It's just another one of your pathetic little events. My mother snapped over the phone. Hayden has his senior day game this Saturday. You understand, right? Real family comes first. I didn't argue. I didn't tell her what the little event actually was. I simply said, okay, skip it, and hung up. 2 days later, I married the orthopedic surgeon who operated on my brother's shoulder in 2023, the same surgeon whose name my mother used to brag about to all her friends. She chose to watch my brother sit on the bench instead of walking me down the aisle. At 11:47 p.m. that night, another one single Instagram story, my phone exploded. 17 missed calls by 2 o'clock in the morning. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling because she finally realized exactly who I married and what kind of evidence he had been holding for years. My name is Brooke Palmer. I'm 30 years old. Welcome back to Crime Flux. This is where we share stories about family betrayal, quiet strength, and the moment someone finally says enough. If this story hits close to home, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Let me tell you what happened next. The phone call came in at 7:14 p.m. on a Thursday, March 12, 2026. I was standing in the rental hall of Cornerstone Chapel in Franklin, Tennessee, finishing the seating chart for 50 people. The wedding coordinator, Margot, was on the other side of the room taping floor markers for the procession. I had a glass of water in one hand and a black felt tip pen in the other. When my mother's name lit up on the screen, I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. I answered because of muscle memory. 28 years of muscle memory, sweetheart, she said, and I could already hear the verdict in the first word. Hayden made the SEC senior weekend roster. The coach said he might even start Saturday afternoon. We can't drive down, you understand, right, family? I looked down at the seating chart. There were two cards in front row of the bride's side. One said mother of the bride, the other was blank. The space where my stepfather's name should have gone had been crossed out a week earlier. When I realized he was no longer relevant to the ceremony or to my life, I didn't say anything of that to her. I said, okay, skip it. There was a small pause, the kind of pause she used when she expected me to push back so she could call me dramatic. Don't be like that, honey. It's just one of your little events. We'll make up it to you later. Okay, I'll call you next weekend. We can get lunch. Okay, I have to go. I hung up before she could say something else. Then I walked to the seating chart and pulled the mother of the bride card off the front row. I held it in my hand for a moment. Margot saw me from across the room and lifted her chin in question. Do you want me to leave the seats? She asked. Leave one for my father. She nodded once. She didn't ask why I was using the singular. Some seats are easier to fill than others, she said, and walked back to the floor markers. I drove home that night to the apartment Owen and I had been sharing for 14 months. He was in the kitchen making dinner. I told him I'd just talked to my mum. Did you ask her? He said. I told her enough. He didn't ask me for clarity. He never did that. That was one of the first things I noticed about him. Hayden was a walk-on utility infielder at Vanderbilt. SEC home opener weekend in baseball means the first conference series of the year, a Saturday afternoon game that mattered to the coach who had never started my brother and wasn't going to start him this time either. My mother didn't know that. She believed every weekend was the one. She had believed that for 16 years. That night, I opened my email and scrolled back to the save the date I had sent her on January 9th. The red receipt was on. She'd opened it. She hadn't replied. The card sat on her refrigerator under a magnet shaped like a baseball bat. I closed the laptop. I didn't tell Owen what I just confirmed. I went to sleep. I want to back up because if you only heard that call, you'd think I was cruel for not correcting her. You'd think I should have just said, Mom, it's my wedding. I want to tell you why I didn't. When I was 23, I had a boyfriend named Caleb. We'd been together for 9 months. He was kind. He listened. He told me his parents wanted to meet me. I was going to move into his apartment in Brentwood. I made the mistake of telling my mother. I made it because she had just called me, all warm, asking what was new. I wanted to give her something. I wanted to be the kind of daughter who had good news to share with her mother on a Sunday afternoon. She called Caleb the next day. I didn't know that until later. She told him I was going through a hard time. She said she was worried about my mental stability. She said I had a history of overreacting in relationships. She said it the way she said everything. Concerned, soft, almost reluctant. Caleb broke up with me 3 weeks later. He said the timing wasn't right. He said he needed to focus on his career. I didn't find out what really happened until 2020 when Caleb sent me a Facebook message out of nowhere. He said he'd been thinking about me. He said he was sorry. He said your mother told me things I shouldn't have believed. That was the moment I made my rule. I wrote it in a notebook I kept in my drawer desk. I still have that notebook. Don't tell her anything she can use. I followed that rule for 6 years. But that rule didn't start with Caleb. Caleb was just a name. It started when I was 14. That spring, the Rotary Club gave me a regional academic scholarship. It was 1,200 and a handshake at the luncheon. I had won it for an essay I'd written about civic responsibility. The ceremony was on a Saturday morning in May. The principal had said in his letter, "We hope your parents will be in attendance." The Saturday of the ceremony, Hayden had a Pop Warner game. He was 10. He played safety. He had been playing safety since he was 7. My mother sat me down on the Thursday before and said, "Honey, you can pick up your reward next week, can't you? Hayden only gets one Saturday." I said, "Okay." I drove myself to the luncheon. I didn't have a license. My grandmother drove me. She wore a dress my mother had given her 2 birthdays earlier. When the principal handed me the check, he leaned in and said, "Tell your parents we're proud of them too," he said. "I will." I didn't. When I got home, my mother was on the phone with my aunt recounting Hayden's inception. She didn't ask about the luncheon. She didn't ask how the speech went. She didn't ask if my grandmother had liked the chicken. That night in my room, I wrote down a sentence on the inside of a school notebook. I was 14. I didn't know it would matter. Don't expect it to come. I followed that sentence in some form for 16 years. When I was 17, I was at my high school graduation. I gave a 4-minute speech. My mother left in the middle to take Hayden to a tournament 3 hours away. She told me later she'd watched the video. She hasn't. There was no video. The school had stopped recording graduations in 2010 because of a budget cut. I knew that because I had been on the yearbook committee. When I was 20, I made Dean's List for the 4th straight semesters at the University of Tennessee. I didn't tell her. When I was 22, I got my first job offer in hospital admin. I called my father. By the time I was 23, I had built a wall I didn't know I was building. Caleb knocked it down for a minute. My mother put it back up. I rebuilt the rest of it myself. You learn after enough years that some people don't want to know you. They want to know what to do with you. The first person who ever changed that rule was Owen. I told him everything about the credit card numbers I would later learn she'd open in my name during college. After Caleb, about the scholarship lunch, about Hayden's recruitment visits, about being asked to be helpful with every birthday card that needed addressing and every gas tank that needed filling. Owen listened without interrupting. He didn't try to fix anything. He just listened. The way I have learned since that men who become surgeons listen like the room belongs to whoever is bleeding. When I was done, he said one thing. You don't owe people the version of yourself they refuse to learn. I have a feeling he didn't know that I'd remember that sentence for the rest of my life. I met Owen in September of 2023 in a surgical consult room at the sports medicine. Hayden had torn the labrab in his right shoulder. Throwing motion, my mother said over the phone like she'd been reading a medical chart. Catcher's injury, common, the trainer said common. She told me I had to take him to the consult. She had to work. She'd always had to work when something was inconvenient. I drove down from Nashville. Hayden was 19, hungover, wearing a hoodie inside out. He sat in the chair next to me in the waiting room and looked at his phone. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I've driven far. He never did. When they called us in, I took out an index card from my wallet. I always carried index cards, habit from work. The doctor walked in. He was 31 then, lean, dark hair, a clean white coat over scrubs. He shook my hand before he shook Hayden's. "Dr. Owen Cladwell," he said. "Brooke, his sister." He glanced at Hayden, then back at me. "You're the one who's going to make sure he does this, aren't you?" I wrote Dr. Owen Cladwell at the top of the index card. "Apparently," I said. He explained the surgery, lab room repair, outpatient, 6 weeks in a sling, 12 PT sessions minimum, non-negotiable for full recovery. I wrote every word. Hayden looked at his phone the whole time. Once when Owen asked him a direct question, "Have you had any prior shoulder injuries?" Hayden looked up, blinked and said, "I don't know. My mom would know." He was 19 years old. He didn't know his own medical history. Owen wrote that down too. When the consult was over, he handed me a single paper discharge instructions signed on a private letterhead. Sports medicine post-operative plan. Patient Hayden Palmer, PT protocol, 12 sessions complete at Sports Medicine PT or pre-approved external provider with documented referral. He had circled the words pre-approved external provider just in case. He said some patients want to do it closer to home. I put the page in my purse. I put the index card in my purse on top of it. I didn't think about either of them for a long time. In the parking lot afterwards, Hayden lit a cigarette. He told my mother he had quit. He hadn't quit. He blew smoke out the side of his mouth and said, "She's going to be mad I missed practice for this." I said, "Probably not." He said, "Cool." He got into the passenger seat and put his earbuds in. We drove the 4 hours back to Nashville in silence. He fell asleep with his mouth open. When I dropped him off at his dorm, he said thanks for the ride. That was it. I drove the rest of the way to my apartment thinking about how Owen had asked Hayden a direct question and Hayden had answered my mother would know. I didn't know yet that my mother did know and that she was already deciding on what to do. The surgery was on September 28, 2023. My mother arrived in the parking lot 30 minutes before they wheeled Hayden back. She was wearing a baseball jersey she didn't earn the right to wear and had a thermos of coffee in her hand. She posted a photo of herself in the waiting room to Facebook before they'd even prepped him. "Praying for my boy, football family forever. Wait, baseball family forever. Blessed mom." She fixed the typo 6 minutes later. She left after an hour. She said she had to get back to Brentwood for a dental staff meeting. There was no staff meeting. I was the one who sat in the chair for 8 hours. I was the one Dr. Cladwell came to find when the surgery ended. He stood by the chair and talked to me for 15 minutes. He drew a small diagram on the back of his clipboard. He said the lab room repair had gone clean. He said the PT window started in 2 weeks. He said, "Your mother left?" It wasn't a question. "She had a meeting," I said. He looked at me. He didn't argue. A week later, my mother posted a Facebook status that I screenshotted and didn't save. I didn't need to save it. I remembered every word. "So grateful to Dr. Owen Cradwell, a sports medicine, for taking such good care of my boy. Top surgeon in Tennessee. Blessed mom, baseball." The post got 92 likes. That post is going to matter later. I remember reading it on my couch that night and thinking how strange it was that she could spell his name correctly on Facebook, but she had never spelled mine correctly on a birthday card. Brooke is 5 letters. She wrote Brooke on every card she ever gave me until I was 26 and pointed it out. She said, "Honey, don't be petty." I stopped getting cards. Hayden didn't go to PT. I called him after 2 weeks. He said, yeah, he was on doing it. I called him after week 4. He said he was doing exercises at home. I called Dr. Cladwell's office on week 6 and asked if they could pull his scheduling history. The receptionist said they had no record of him scheduling. She asked if he'd been referred externally. I said I didn't know. I didn't ask my mother. That was the rule. I called Hayden one more time. Week 7, he picked up on the 4th ring. There was music in the background. He sounded fine. "Hey, are you doing your PT?" "Yeah, I'm good."